he will be speaking about his favorite director. I should speak very less. When you become a fan or really like them like this, you really do not want to hear anything other than what you think. Kindly take us.
Thank you very much, Dinesh ji. First of all, let me congratulate you for having put together some of the best films that you can have a, sort of the opportunity to watch in a place like Delhi. I feel very sad that Delhi has no really major film festival any longer, and so therefore efforts like yours need to be commended and backed, and probably that is one of the only reasons why I have left the World Cup cricket and I'm here with you to essentially give my moral support. Cinema itself has got many layers. You have cinema, which is the popular cinema which all of us like can probably throng to. We buy tickets, we have fans, we go to see the cinema of Hollywood as much as we see cinema of Bombay. What should I say? The obstacle of art. And that obstacle of art is the economy of cinema. Unlike other art forms, you can be a painter and you just need a canvas and you need colors and you need a paintbrush, you can make it. Cinema is expensive. It is a technical medium. It is a collaborative medium. It needs a cameraman, it needs actors, it needs storytelling, it needs music, it needs set designing. So all of them put together, in many ways, form great cinema. So whenever you see something that really is superb, it is because every one of these elements in some way have meshed together to create a symphony of music. And some cinema, some filmmakers rise above that. They let you think, they remain with you. They have, I won't call that messages, it's like reading a great book. Certain books remain with you, certain poets remain with you. To me, Ingmar Bergman was one such filmmaker. He was a filmmaker whose films couldn't be taken lightly, define entertainment. To me, entertainment in trying to understand what the world is all about. And this aspect of trying to understand life, trying to understand the nuances of relationships, trying to understand the world, the context within which you live today, is what made Bergman such a formidable force. He was, in my mind, a philosopher of cinema. He remains a transcendental filmmaker, a filmmaker in the class of a Bresson in France or a Renoir, in painting, or a Rembrandt who did incredible work. His work will remain eternal. He is as great a filmmaker in his cultural context of Sweden as Kurosawa was in Japan, as Satyajit Ray was in India, as Buñuel was in Spain, as Truffaut and Chabrol and the new wave cinema filmmakers were in France, because he was rooted to the culture of Europe. He was rooted to exploring the same theme time and again in his films, but time and again he explored it in a different form. His early films, of which actually The Seventh Seal was not his first film, it was, I think, his third or fourth film that he made, and it was, it was based on a radio play that he wrote. It wasn't even based on a theatrical thing. But what happened is that gradually, as Ingmar Bergman went on to sort of make films, he created a repertoire of some of the finest actors the world had seen. Not in this film, but in this film you see a man called Max von Sydow. Max von Sydow went on to become legendary filmmaker, an actor. And he was in many of Bergman's films. There was Liv Ullmann, there was Bibi Andersson. These were all a group with whom he felt comfortable working. He felt comfortable with working with them because they understood what he was trying to achieve. He came from theatre. He was making theatrical productions. He was a man who loved opera. He loved, television. That kind of spans in such an incredible manner the entire, what I might say, analysis of contemporary European culture post-war. Post-war Europe was in many ways devastated. There was so much of misery. There was so much of heartbreak. But he didn't get into the period of war as such and showed what was happening with war. He took characters out of them. And from those characters, he asked questions. And the fundamental question that he asked was what we ask all the time, but we never pay attention to it. Is life worth living? Is there God? Is there existence? What is existence? Why do we create God? Is God about because we do not have answers to the unknown? And does life end with death? These fundamental philosophical questions seem to be, to the average man, very, very profound maybe. But what was interesting in Bergman's film is that he brings them out through a fable. For instance, the Seventh Seal is set in the 14th century. And yet it is set in a village which has plague. But they become allegories of what is contemporary Europe at that time. It was a Europe which was devastated with war. It was a Europe where everybody was almost, you couldn't even believe the horrors that they'd gone through. And there was Ingmar Bergman making a film about a knight who returns from a crusade for many, many years, and death is waiting for him. And death is in the form of a character. And so the knight says, challenges the death to a duel in chess and tells him that if I win, you spare my life. If you win, you take me along. And in that process, the entire metaphysical question, love, what is death, what happens after death, and most importantly, the silence of God. Because Bergman and many of those people who came from the sense of what I call the Lutheran club, the Lutheran line of Christianity, were very bleak visions they had. For them, if there was God, why is there so much suffering? What is he doing about it? Now in Hinduism, we bring in karma and we bring in reincarnation and we kind of justify it all. Christianity doesn't have that. So for a person like Bergman to explore that, and that too in the medium of cinema, you had people like Jean-Paul Sartre, and you had great writers who did that in the book. But Bergman's greatness lies in the fact that he did that with cinema. And he did that with what? He did that with music. And he did that with silence. He has the silence in these films, which really is the silence of God for him. And a filmmaker has to be audacious. He must be courageous to take a subject like this and then talk to you with silence in between.
If by Mr. Sharma, the chess game which is played is a very nice metaphor which he created to say that some people think that you can become immortal and evade mortalism by doing something very great. We are all slaves of that. And so that metaphor came out so strong. In fact, what I would like to ask you is that, in fact, Ingmar Bergman had, I think, 3 zones of cinema in an entire career. One, when he started, it was about, in fact, satire and humor. A little more. Right in the beginning.
Smiles of a summer night.
Yeah. And then there was a second phase when that was the phase when this, when he started.
Winter Light.
Yeah, Winter Light.
Wild Strawberries.
When he started asking questions. And then the last phase or later phase where he has, which started perhaps somewhere in
Persona
and
Silence. In fact, the film called Silence. And then he had his greatest film, Cries and Whispers.
Yeah, Cries. From there in onwards, Cries and Whispers onwards. Fanny and Alexander. He was introspecting and giving some of the answers himself.
Well, I'm not sure if you got the answers, but what was interesting was that he went into a memory trip. Remember, as he was very young when he made these films.
Yeah.
So when he went into his 70s and 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
he became nostalgic. And he became nostalgic about his own life. He became nostalgic about his own learning of cinema. And Fanny and Alexander is a classic case of a young boy who learns what is cinema. You know, the incredible thing about Bergman was the magic lantern, which is basically what the camera was. When you put the camera and you have the little light and the light comes in and you have an inverted image in the back. These little magic shows, what he grew up with watching. These are what taught him and drew him to cinema.
I would like dare to say, how do you, as you have yourself been a very nice director, produced great work besides New Delhi Times, how do you find this aspect?
This is by Fisher, but otherwise, later on all his films, he's probably the greatest cameraman the world has produced. He is the father of what is called bounce lighting, which means lighting that looks real. The daylight looks like daylight, even though it's been created by lamps.
I again take you back to his personal life. Ingmar Bergman owed a lot, both ways, to his childhood.
Of course.
I mean, that is
Of course,
what
absolutely.
gave him trigger to make what he made. And also in that journey, that path of reconciling with what you always disliked about your life and coming to terms with it. Like he said that Wild Strawberries, when he finished, he somehow was at peace with his father.
Well, that is true. Remember, as I said, he came from a very strong, with a very, austere life. This was life which didn't take pleasure easily. The Lutheran brand of Christianity is a very austere brand. And the weather in Sweden is a very bleak weather. So when, all these elements, we are creatures, we are sort of creatures who are created also by our environment. Our philosophy, our thinking, many ways we internalize it and then it comes out in our art, especially artists. Artists are far more sensitive to it. And so he had seen relationships. And if you see his later work, sisters got cancer and the other sisters come together and then suddenly the entire dysfunctional quality of the family comes, comes out slowly surfacing, And it was one of those few films, I think you noticed, any of you have seen it, I don't know, but if you ever see that film, it was one of the first films in which all fade-ins and fade-outs are into red. Normally, all fade-ins and fade-outs are black in cinema. But Bergman took that courage because he was using the blood, which was, in one of the most brutal scenes of abortion that is there in that cinema, and he used that as a symbol. So you had Bergman using the true grammar of cinema. When you watch people like Buñuel, or you watch people like Fellini, or you watch people like Kurosawa, they use cinema in its purest form, which means they are very, very particular about the compositions. They are very, very particular about the lighting. They are particular about words they use, about the silence that is there, the music that comes in, where the music comes in, where it doesn't go. And they are very particular about the actors. They give a lot of improvisation to the actors, and yet they keep a tight rein. That delicate balance between creating your own vision and allowing a collaborative effort to enhance your vision, to make it greater than what you originally thought. So Bergman's work is always greater than the sum of its parts. You will realize that every time you watch a Bergman film, you see something in it differently. But yes, there is a certain patience required for Bergman, because Bergman made films at his pace. Silence cannot have, you cannot race through silence. And to him, God is silent. And so you find a lot of these things. For instance, in this film itself, there is a scene where the knight goes for a confession, and there is nobody in the church, and he doesn't realize that he's confessing to death himself, and yet there is no music, but there is the silence, and there is one sound, and that is the sound of the church bell. It's incredible.
yeah,
I mean, I don't want to spoil it for you
I
all, but
think coming back to this film, it was a very difficult subject to handle, and format to choose. You know, to deal with these kind of themes and subjects, you need a format. And I mean, I think his whole background of theater, writing, opera, everything, he combined all kind of expressions like expressionism, bit of surrealism, bit of theater, and he combined it all so well. And
there is a troupe inside the film itself.
yeah.
There is a dancing troupe that's going through the village, you know.
True. And I'm so happy that this was the cinema which actually brought him to the world stage.
Absolutely.
That's-
This is probably one of the most original films made in terms of cinema itself.
Yeah.
If you look at originality of cinema, this is a very original subject, because it's very difficult to take them into great cinema. Cinema demands realism. Most of the time, anybody who works with allegories falters. They find it a little difficult to sort of, you know. But I think you're running out of time, and I think you should now.
Yeah, I think thanks for your patience, but you know, when you start talking of these directors and what they have done, it so
Absolutely.
happens we tax you. But thank you for your patience.
Enjoy yourself. Thank you.